Amoral Minds. I'm your host, RJ Roger, and what we're going to talk about today is Dr. Umar Johnson. He's a black activist, a psychologist, and he's probably the most important living black man today. So who's Umar Johnson? He's a highly acclaimed guy. He's turned himself into a household name through statements deemed as highly controversial, not just in white culture, but within his own culture, within black culture. He's academically acclaimed. He's achieved a PhD in psychology, trained in political science. He has been critical of interracial marriage, same-sex marriage. He's had public squabbles with Kevin Samuels for his, let's call it, unkind words against black women. He's been critical of abortion within the black community, Planned Parenthood, homosexuality.
Think people can be born gay?
No, I don't. And there's no conclusive evidence to that point.
Wow, a lot of gay people say they were born that way. They said that, you're saying
a lot of
that
murderers say they were born murderers. A lot of pedophiles say they were born pedophiles. So if we're going to say there's a gay gene, we're going to have to open up the conversation and say that there's a pedophile gene, which means if I molest children, I shouldn't go to jail because after all, it was in my DNA.
What did I
Be
say
careful
yesterday?
about opening up one door. You got to open up all them doors.
What I say?
In fact, it's already been predicted that when the next DSM comes out, pedophilia will be normal behavior.
We need to drop a
Remember,
bomb on them
homosexuality
right
was once mental illness up until 74. They changed it in 74. Some people thought homosexuality would never be considered normal in 74.
But
once you say something is normal, it's easy to make it legal.
He's even been critical of President Barack Obama. He has made statements against Mexican immigration and how it's hurting the black community. And his greatest contribution towards his field of academic study is probably his work in the misdiagnosis of ADHD within black children. So there have been many major black activists in America, but there's always those few that ruffle the feathers of establishment America. And the two I would say that really made establishment America uncomfortable have been Malcolm X and Louis Farrakhan. Two people who are highly researched, historically briefed, and have completely brilliant minds, okay? Now, in most black households, Malcolm X and Louis Farrakhan are beloved, contrary to what you hear in establishment media, establishment books, or any type of establishment media sources. They paint these two as people that we have to be afraid of and concerned about. And truthfully, many black people, especially public or celebrity black people, don't want to profess their thoughts on Louis Farrakhan. Most of them will just kind of gloss over that. They might just jump to a safer bet like Martin Luther King maybe. But Malcolm X and Louis Farrakhan, they kind of ruffle the feathers of a lot of people. But I can tell you with great certainty, contrary to what most black people might say in public or to their friends, especially their establishment friends, we'll call them establishment friends, Malcolm X and Louis Farrakhan are beloved in most black households. Now, I don't consider myself an expert or a specialist on African American studies, but I find the history extremely interesting. My dad talked about it a lot when I was a kid, and he would give me books, and I have read books. He's told me books to read. So some of the great books that, and I have many more, you can probably see some of them behind me, but some of the ones that I really like: Race Matters, Cornel West. I think it's actually, this is a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, check out Cornel West, Race Matters. I even met Cornel West at one of his seminars, and I have his autograph. Actually, there it is. Dr. Cornel West signed this book and gave it to me. I took it there and he signed it. Another great book, of course, Frederick Douglas. Okay. This is a book that wasn't that popular, but this book kind of became more popular, and it was brought to my attention by Dr. Boyce Watkins. But Black Labor, White Wealth by Claude Anderson. Another great book. We all read this, right? The Miseducation of the Negro, great book. Now, I don't necessarily, well, I'll say frankly, I do not subscribe to the overall theory of Booker T. Washington. But Up From Slavery is a really good book that is worth reading. He kind of takes a position almost that there's beneficial properties to do with slavery. I disagree. But the book is worth reading. Tells you a lot about what was going on during slavery times. And of course, my personal favorite is Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. Fantastic book. And there's many other ones that I could talk about. But why do I talk about Louis Farrakhan, Malcolm X, and go through all of these books? Where does Umar Johnson fit within all of these people? So I want to shift gears a bit and talk about a group that was formed in Harlem in 1964 called the 5% Nation. Now, the 5% Nation was formed by a guy named Allah the Father, Clarence 13X. Now, this guy was a student of Malcolm X, and he essentially broke off from the Nation of Islam. And he used to walk around Harlem and teach, okay? Now, he struggled at first to connect with people, but the people who he really connected with was the young people. The young black people in Harlem liked this guy, liked the way he spoke, liked the teachings that he was bringing to them. And as we know, the most important people in any society, in any group, and in any ethnic background is always the young people, because young people will write the future. They will redirect the bus in many ways. So if you have a dumb youth, you can almost predict that you'll have a dumb future. Okay. Now, Allah the Father has this group. He forms a group called the 5% Nation. And this group, the theory behind what 5% means is that 85% of people are essentially ignorant. They are sheep. They are the kind of people that need a following. They need to be led. They need a leader, okay? And then the next 10% of people are super elites. They are wealthy. They are people that understand information. They understand how the world works, how money works, how systems work, okay? And most importantly, they understand that 85% of people are essentially mouth breathers and knuckle draggers that have no knowledge of the world or knowledge of self. And that 10%, they exploit the ignorance of the bottom 85%. So then you have what's left is 5%, okay? So the 5%ers, hence the 5% Nation, the 5%ers are the same as the 10%ers in the understanding of the 85% and their knowledge of self. But what makes the 5%ers different is that the 5%ers take that knowledge and they try to enlighten and teach and guide the 85% with righteous, dignified, integrity-based principles. They try to free them with the knowledge that they have. The main point to take from the 5%ers is the understanding that 85% of people need to be led. They need to be taught. They have an ignorant understanding of themselves and the world.
He broke me! This game is very... he got the rebound!
Lame bitch
I'm
request.
looking for the
Yeah, shake that ass.
Do you identify as black? No, it's a serious question because you might not identify. Can you please put the mic? Thank you. Okay.
When I walked into the room,
I am not done with my question.
So there's a concept in my book, The Don, 36 Rules of the Bosses, that I teach. And what the meaning of this rule essentially is that the intelligent people, the leadership, the people who are in a front position, they need to understand that they are leading for a reason. They possess a knowledge, a wisdom, an understanding that makes them ripe to lead a mass of people. All right. They are essentially what Francis Coppola called the headlights to society. They are the people up front. People like Umar Johnson, people like Malcolm X, people like Farrakhan. Okay. But they have to understand that the people who they are leading are not leaders. Okay. They are not bosses. They are not people who are ripe for leadership. If they were, they would not be following you. Okay. So I teach that you have to come down to your following. You have to speak to them at their level of understanding.
I keep telling y'all, white folks are racist. They racist. All of them. Black men date out their race more than all other men put together. You know why? Racial inferiority. We don't think we're as good as the white man, so we need the white woman in order for us to feel an artificial sense of equality. It is self-hatred to the 20th power. Interracial marriage is economic betrayal.
That won't work. You have to speak to the people in a recognized tongue. 85% of people are blind. So the vision of the leader doesn't matter. The blind man can't see. If you come to him and you're guiding him in the way that he is tripping, in the way that he's falling and he's stumbling over rocks and pebbles, he's blaming you because he's following you. He doesn't understand where he's going. So he fights the very person that is trying to save him. Dr. Umar Johnson is brilliant.
No place in Black America you can go and find the 4 essential institutions needed for a community: bank, school, supermarket, hospital. And you know why that's ironic? Last year, Black America in 2016, we spent $2 billion on Air Jordans, $4 billion on liquor and alcohol, $600 million on fast food, and we bought twice the amount of Mercedes-Benzes as white America, although white America has twice the wealth of black folk. So the question becomes, what is it about the Mercedes-Benz that makes it so attractive to African Americans even when they can barely afford it? And it's because it's a status symbol.
That's all.
And one thing we know about oppressed people, when you can't enjoy true freedom, you surround yourself with the symbols of that freedom.
Absolutely.
And that's why the Louis bag is so important. That's why our children will kill for Air Jordans. It's not the sneaker, it's what it represents. And if I believe I'm worthless, that means I can only add value to myself by what I put on my body as opposed to what I put in it.
He has a keen understanding of the history of black people, which gives Umar an immense amount of power. I say this all the time. Too many people confuse money with power. Information is power. And I always kind of look at intellectualism as a balance between your knowledge of your subject and then your analytical outlook on the subject. And it's kind of a marriage between them both. Now, we have agreed as a culture that we are okay with integration. We are no longer segregated. We are not in silos. We can't interact in only black channels anymore. So we've agreed to the new experience. I once heard Jay-Z say that it's very difficult for a racist to teach his child racism while the child has a poster of Snoop Doggy Dogg on the bedroom wall. And the same theory applies to black children. Our children are in a melting pot school system and they are being raised in a melting pot society. When you're 5 years old and you're in class with white kids and you play on recess with different ethnic groups, your mind is formed from that point that there's nothing wrong with cultural differences. My white buddy, my black buddy, my Hispanic buddy, we all play blocks together. And when you're formed with that mindset and a guy like Umar approaches you and says, these are not your people. You shouldn't befriend these people. You shouldn't buy their products. You shouldn't marry their women. They're just going to turn away. Rule 19, speak the language of the soldier. You have to tailor your speech to the people who you're talking to, or you will be left to talk to only yourself. I'm RJ Roger. This is Amoral Minds. I got a great book coming out, The Don. It'll be in stores soon. Please support the book when it hits stores. Peace and love, and I'll see you next week.